I think a lot of it is ancestral too. Like aiming for perfection is like a form of survival for many of our people. Like when I look at like pictures of Black folks in like the 40s and 50s, I mean, they look perfect. Can't imagine how much money a lot of folks had, but they always look like they had a lot, even if they didn't. And I think about like the consequences that our children can experience if their parents aren't aiming for a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic idea of or value of perfection. You know what I'm saying? What types of experiences or betrayal that society will have for them if we don't. So I feel like we're in like the middle of like this really interesting period, this colonized period of trying to imagine a new world, but also prepare our children to survive in the world that exists. And that's very complicated.
You're listening to the Lifelong Learning Podcast with your hosts, Mama Kaya and Mama Nika from the Tribe Learning Co-op, an evolving village that supports families and finding their tribe through sharing resources and responsibilities. Journey with us as we explore what and how we learn with each other, our children, and ourselves. We and our guests will contribute to conversations around wellness through self-directed learning, parenting, sustainability, and community. If you've landed here, it's not a coincidence. What you're seeking is always seeking you too. We are so grateful for your presence energizing the tribe. Peace and welcome.
All right, y'all. Well, let's get right into it. So I decided that this would be a good conversation for us to have. We've been having it kind of within the tribe amongst ourselves. And I want to say maybe the past couple of months, maybe 2-3 months, we've been talking more intentionally about ways that we can bring what we do and what we offer like out into the virtual realm. And, you know, we mamas as hell. So things don't always go according to the plan or, you know, how we want it to go. And that just lends itself to a larger conversation of like, look, whose idea of like how this should go or look or flow really are we prescribing to? And that's really something that I've been asking myself probably in every walk of life. In my partnership to my baby daddy, in parenthood, in my relationships to my friends, the way that I've decided to unschool my children, my diet, fucking spirituality, almost everything. It's like there are just these standards that sometimes I don't even know exactly where I got them from. And maybe something that I was like, clinging to hard 5 years ago. Now I look back and I'd be like, ooh, that was me, you know? And what I'm recognizing coming up personally that is like really hard for me to admit is that like, I don't know, prescribing to some standard or ideal, like really becomes wrapped up into my identity. Like whatever it is that I believe in for the moment, I'm like, yeah, this is right. That's why I believe it, you know? And so I guess, yeah, I identify with it. So then fast forward, identity shifts a little bit. And sometimes there's like this grief period of recognizing that like, it was wrong or maybe not even a matter of right and wrong, but what you thought before, you don't think it anymore. And you maybe told some people some of this stuff, like, because you believed it, you know, you invited people into this same like standard. And there is like some shame kind of wrapped up in there. But I think the grief part really stands out for me of just recognizing like, wow, just making a decision about something like that I believe or how I practice or how I eat, or how I parent, or even just like this journey of entrepreneurship, you know, just really thinking about the ways that I'm doing it versus all these, you know, coaches who popped up on the scene saying, this is the way, and really asking myself these questions around like, did you identify who you are with, these beliefs. And the truth is, like, yeah, I did. So then today I'm like grieving, like really the death of that old version of me. And I think that's really hard in this type of society, because I think the obsession with, just being right or knowing, being the knower, having all the knowledge is very, very prominent. But I think personally for me, what I'm recognizing is that being right and not making a mistake truly is wrapped up in like my sense of security and like my acceptance and my survival, and like, will I get love? Like, is people gonna fuck with me or what? And I think that is like the really deep part that I recognize, like just within relationships, within communities, is even though we gather around these things that we like wholeheartedly believe in, like next year it's going to be a different way. It's going to be a new way. And as adults, we have come into this place where we don't even have the grace for ourselves that we have for like these people that we bringing up. We're like, they make mistakes all the time. They think one way, hold it close to chest, but tomorrow they like, no, I don't think like that no more. And they don't have that grief period. At least I don't witness it in my children and many other children that I care for. They don't have that grief period because they didn't identify with it. They just allowed themselves to be in a human process of like, I'm doing my personal best today, and tomorrow that might be different. And also I can go back and repair if I need to, or what have you. And to me, that just feels so light, and like I aspire towards that, but I'm just not quite there. And so as we were talking in the tribe of just like, what are some of the ways that we want to share with community? One of the ways was like, okay, we can do workshops, or we could do podcasts, or this or that. And immediately in that process, we start thinking about all of the ways that we needed that to be perfect, and I think that's just natural. I do that in my own work. I'm just like, okay, before I can do this, I need to pop out the gate like 100% perfect. And I don't even, if I'm being honest, and this is why this topic of perfectionism comes up, because like perfect, yeah, like you could attain that. Maybe perfect is relative. What's perfect to me might not be to you. Or, if you can repeatedly get at this measurement, it might be perfect because you can repeat it over time. But like perfectionism is really rooted in, like, in my opinion, somebody else's standard. Because if it was yours, I don't think that some of the ways that we show up to our goals or our life would feel how they feel. And one of the ways for me is like working hard as fuck. Like that actually doesn't make a lot of intellectual sense to me, but there's something in me that does it because I feel like this is the way to like achieve this unrealistic standard. Or if I'm feeling doubtful about if I can't achieve it, I'll just like sit on my hands and kind of procrastinate or just not do it at all because I'm like fearing if I mess up or, I don't think it'll really look how I want it to look. And so I'm almost like immobilized or paralyzed in a way because I'm trying to meet a standard that actually can't be met because it's kind of ambiguous. Like, what's a perfect parent or, what's a perfect body? Like, I know that when we say these things, like something comes into mind. And if it ain't you, then I think you're struggling with perfectionism because it's putting something outside of yourself as like the pinnacle, if you will. And so, something I'm just sitting with, like, it's very resonant in my life right now as I'm like shifting, move to a new state, starting some different work similar work, still birth work, but in a different way, connecting with new people. My children are like full-blown self-directed learners at this point. Homeschooling is like in the past and things feel new and things feel really raw. And it's just really salient for me, just this idea of reaching some standard and just like really, really allowing myself the space to question. I think that's probably been like the first step. So I wanted to just bring it out and share and just kind of sit in counsel. Like that's what I really think these tribe chats are for, is an opportunity for us to sit in counsel, ways to just talk about how something is showing up in our day to day, whether that's specific to parenting or schooling or not schooling or whatever it is, health, wellness, and just being able to share in any way that feels okay for you. And also to witness and listen, because I think that witnessing is actually very active and not as passive as many people might think, but being able to just witness in what's happening for other people. And then also maybe taking away some tools. Like I know perfectionism is, it will have us being very solution focused. Like, okay, what are we doing this for? What are the results? Like, what's the takeaways? But the reality is there may not be one. However, this is an opportunity that if somebody does have something that they can share or they can offer, then we can take it away in our own way. So I just have a question that I wanted to pose to everybody to kind of reflect. You can answer it in your mind, in the chat, or just journal about it. But I wanted to ask, in what ways can you see perfectionism showing up in your life today? And when you think about whatever those ways are they rooted in something about your identity or how you see yourself? A little more context of why I do think that this conversation is very resonant right now is because, like, clearly after the pandemic, I just think that, people are shifting, I'll say. People are shifting in a whole lot of ways. And I really think one of the major ways that we are shifting is like being in a space of more self-reliance, whatever that might look like for you. And being in that space requires a whole bunch of unlearning about how you are not good enough.
I just want to start off by giving thanks, Mama Nika. I felt like your whole reflection was perfect. And, it's really humbling to hear things that I be feeling, but can't really articulate. So I just appreciate you for facilitating this conversation. To answer the question, I have like a lot of things that I think I struggle with. Clearly parenting, when Tayo and I began having children, I was like playing this game with myself. Like I wanted to be the perfect dad. And the way that I like created metrics was how exceptional my kids would be, and we started off just that getting rejected immediately. Yaya had some physical developmental delays. She started talking really late. And I remember, feeling like, man, like, did we feed her something wrong? Did we expose her to something? Like, did I not get tested for a genetic, marker that may have impacted her, her development? And and then, I did like my own personal work. I tried to, but I can still see like these remnants of perfectionism show up in so many areas, like, I don't know, how Kamalu, my son, keeps his room clean, or their reading levels, right? And then I'm just like, yo, all this has to do with just me and like my standards and like my insecurities. So I think like, just my self-imagery is rooted in an imperfect standard that I'll never meet. I'm really, I feel insecure about my body. And I'll be like following all these bodybuilders on Instagram and they be like, man, like the journey, you'll never get there. Like, this was my before picture. And I'm like, man, I wish I could get to your before picture. Dude looking like amazing, right? And, dudes get there and then they're like, yeah, I got another show or another, milestone I want to meet. And I'm just like, man, like, this strive towards perfection, it's never going, you're never going to get there, So, I think right now I'm doing the work and trying to just appreciate the journey and appreciate the lessons and, recognize that like everything's meaningful, whether I was wrong 5 years ago about like my standards of Yaya's development or how I'm disciplining Kamalu or whatever, or how I'm, showing up as a partner or not showing up as a partner. I could find so many examples of me not being perfect, but even in those lessons, I find a lot of meaning in. So, yeah, anyways. Yep.
I appreciate you for opening up like that, Army, because I relate so well to that. My journey of perfectionism has been a long one, and I can't even tell you when it started. I'm starting to think back on stuff. I'm like, ooh, I was starting to show these signs at 10 years old. Like memories are just kind of like flooding back or whatever. And I had the same thing with Indigo. I think like I had the same thoughts that you expressed about Yaya with Indigo when she was younger. And big old head. And it was a humbling experience. I would say that. That's probably the best word that I could use for it. I was really humbled because it's something, and me saying something is that's just a filler word. I still don't even have the word for it, but it was something to have the idea of the child that you would have and then have a child that you didn't think that you would have, or come across some challenges that you never thought that you would experience, And so it was real humbling for me. And I think that it killed my ego a little bit, which kind of opened the door to like, it opened the door enough for me to see like you were living in an illusion of perfectionism. Like you really thought like, oh, if I did this, these are the outcomes, when that's not real life. And I wasn't prepared for that. So it took me a long time, like some years, to actually come into acceptance. And the grief behind it is hard. It's hard to deal with. But when I think back on like where perfectionism came from in my mind or in my life, I really think the root is just, I just think it was my family. Like they always poured into me and they always said great and wonderful things about me. And I started to wonder as I became an adult, like, do you really see this in me, or are you saying it because you want me to achieve this? And I had a conversation with my dad one time, and he was like, sometimes you have to tell your kids things and then they'll believe that and they will strive to achieve it. He's like, so yeah, you were very smart. He was like, but I wanted to make sure that you always made it a goal to be smarter. And so he's like, I'm gonna always tell you that. So then part of me was kind of just thinking like, are you telling me the truth? Like, are you even telling me the truth or whatever? Or are you just lying to me because you want me to like, you know how people say you got to fake it till you make it or whatever. Like I start having like a little mini identity crisis. Like, well, who am I for real? Like, I don't. So those are some of the things that kind of came in my head. And I think about how I live my life. Like I can remember the mantra, because that's really what it was. You go to school, you get a good education, then you find a husband, get married, and have children. That was the steps. Was no deviating from the steps. And if you deviated from the steps, it was grave consequences. And although like, I did follow the steps. I might not have followed them in the time frame that everybody wanted me to. But I followed them. And now I'm going through another identity shift where I'm thinking about living up to other people's standards, because the truth of the matter is I'm dealing with the disappointment and the grief from those who standards that they put their standards on me. And now I'm feeling like I'm not living up to what you wanted me to be. And I've been so used to this. I'm so accustomed to just being compliant that I don't know what it feels like to break free and just be like, look, this is what I want to do. This is my life. You live your life the way you want to live. I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. And we're going to love each other the same. You know, I do have those feelings of like, man, are you going to love me the same? You know, you going to treat me the same? Or am I going to be a castaway? You know? And I know that is possible because I have examples in my family of other family members that are my age, peers, and those people become the topic of conversation at the family cookout because they not doing this, that, and the third, or they not raising their kids this, that, and the third. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want to be on the other side of that conversation. I don't want to be the one getting talked about. So it kind of like reinforces that people-pleasing, perfectionist mindset. And I just had that thought today or whatever. And I was really sitting with it right before this conversation. I'm like, man, I just kept thinking about it over and over. Like, man, he probably going to be so mad at me or whatever. Or like, why he not, you know, we not vibing the way we used to vibe anymore or whatever. Like, man, what's going on? Maybe I'm not his favorite anymore or whatever. Like, I'm having these intrusive thoughts over and over in my head because I'm trying to live up to an idea or an ideal that somebody else implanted, right? They implanted this idea in my head as a seed. I was little and I didn't even know. And so now I'm grown and I'm like, I don't even know what's mine and what's yours. I'm trying to figure out what's my thoughts and what's your thoughts. So that's my journey to perfectionism. I'm still kind of getting over it or trying to get through it. Not even get over it, just trying to get through it because I think it's just going to be a forever journey.
Well, this is my first time in the chat, and so I'm grateful to be here. Just listening to all of you talk, I was thinking about, I have a 2.5-year-old, and right out the gate, I wasn't good enough. I couldn't breastfeed the way I wanted to. I was on Shanika's phone all the time, you know, trying to figure out how to get it done. And it wasn't necessarily the people directly in my space, but it was social media and the nurses and everybody else telling me what I was supposed to be doing, that I wasn't doing it right, and just keep at it, no matter how exhausting it got. I felt like I couldn't get it, you know? And then being in that space and feeling alone, but reaching out to the person who I knew who could help, you know, Shanika, she definitely was encouraging. But I also found myself comparing my parenting with my husband's, right? Because it's like, how did you parent your first child? Are you doing enough for this one? You know, so then my ideas about what a perfect parent looks like fell onto him without his consent. You know, like I'm now judging him for how he's parenting. And he's fine with how he's parenting. I'm the one judging on how that looks and how often it should be happening. And don't get me wrong, I definitely think there's a share in the responsibility, but I definitely was judging in those moments. You know, I wasn't meeting the target, so he couldn't either, right? We're in this together. So it became a partnership in perfection, really, you know, very quickly. And I could probably talk about all the things in childhood, but what's happening in my life right now is this entrepreneurial journey, right? And so I recognize and relate very much to Shanika's, you know, reference to being paralyzed. For a long time, I thought it had to be done a certain kind of way. And it kept me from sharing my gifts with a lot of people because I wasn't doing it the way they did it, right? And knowing that there are plenty of, Black and brown people who could use my services, who needed the help, I was too afraid that I wouldn't get it right. So I sat on my hands for a very, very long time. And now I'm realizing I can do it however I want to do it, really, and I feel like as soon as I stepped out there, like I have 12 consultations with Black women this week, right? Like it's amazing. Once you can really step outside of yourself and recognize that you determine, how things get done, it's no perfect way. Things just start to fall in place, So here we are, a year and a half of not only me sharing my money with people, and I didn't have to, but also just not sharing my gift with people who really needed it, and there's guilt in that. There's guilt in that. There's shame in that. But I'm recognizing a lot of things, and that every day I'm waking up and giving my best. So I do see the value in that. But it was a hard thing to get over, feeling like I was selling people short in a way, especially coming from, this kind of like social service background. It's like only the Medicaid clients, those are the people who need you. And it's like, what about the people who raised these Medicaid clients? They need it too, right? Because they have trauma and they have things. And so just also reevaluating what a client looks like, what a person who needs help looks like, right? And just having an open door to whoever wants to receive the help. So that also took some adjusting around. There's no perfect person, right? When you step out there, they start talking about niches and target populations and, who's perfect for you. And it's like, honestly, whoever wants to receive my help, we can talk about, what I can offer. But if we're a good fit, we're a good fit by your means or not. So just being on that journey and figuring that out for myself and not letting other people's, ideas about how to do business, dictate how I run my practice. So that's been a big part of my journey lately.
Thank y'all for sharing all of that. I mean, so many things resonated with me as well. And I think the biggest takeaway from just what we have shared so far is like, if it's all of us, if it's 100% of us having this conversation right now that's dealing and navigating through this like toxic, like stress of perfectionism, just imagine like how many more people, dare I say majority or all. I mean, I can't say all, but in some way or another, maybe not in all the ways, but to me, that seems really important for us to really be with this, because we are like the generation that are raising kids right now. So it feels like, yes, we need to do this for ourselves. And also we need to be doing it because, before we started recording, Kaya and I were just talking about something totally different, but something that you said, Kaya, was just like, I need to, if they're watching me, I need to be doing this myself. If she's learning, or no, you're talking about Jeremy, he's really good at just kind of like picking up things like instantaneous almost. And so you're like, yeah, that's the pressure for me to make sure that, the environment that he's in is like, what do I really want you picking this up, And I think this obsession with perfectionism, like I already see it sometimes in my children. And I literally, when I witness it, because in other ways they're so free and they're like full of just wild energy, but then I see it in certain ways and then I'm confused. And I'm like, how could you be like this? Like, I'm raising wild children, like, but then I'm like, sis, I mean, look at yourself. Like, look at yourself. Like, they are picking up the way that I talk to myself, what I allow myself to say and do, what kind of space I allow myself to take up, and so on. And a lot of communication is not the words at all. And I think just energetically, they can feel that. And reading something about perfectionism, and it was just saying that people who obsess over perfection, they achieve less than like high achievers. And it's because they're like so results focused. So they don't have any like real presence for the process. Like there is no enjoyment for the process as much because there's this obsession over the results. And if you're obsessing over if they will be good enough or better than good enough, then likely you just won't do anything. So you'll just be quiet or you'll stay unseen. Or, you know, if you want this particular type of body, you know, I'm probably not going to get that body. So I'm just not going to do shit. But you don't know like what your body could be. Like you could fall in love with the body that you can create for yourself. But, you know, that's somebody else's body. But I think that we really do fall in love, or I'll speak for myself. I fall in love with people's devotion to themselves. It really don't be having nothing to do with like what they are saying. Like it can be people who believe something totally opposite of me. When they are in such devotion to their own standard, the shit is attractive. And I feel like that's because there's a part of me that's saying, I want that too. It's not what you're saying. It's the fact that you can be so connected to what you're saying and to what you believe and take up the space to share it. And I think that that is that energy that like our children can pick up on, where it's just like, okay, you know, you don't got to know everything and you don't have to be right about everything, but are you in devotion to what you actually believe? And when that changes, are you in devotion to the shift in what you believe? And I think that is the part that I'm really trying to allow myself to just be in that. Just like, am I truly devoted to what I believe in, or am I so occupied by something that I think I'm supposed to be doing because that's what keeps me safe? And I put a question in the chat. Do we aim for these perfect standards from a place of fear or control of an outcome? Because I think I identified it for myself through just like listening to everybody. Just like, yeah, I think I'm afraid to not meet a certain standard and what that might mean for me. So therefore, I'd rather just, you know, be unseen, be quiet, take up a little space or what have you. And I watch people who have way less experience than me just go and do way more than me because they're high achievers, but they're not perfectionists. So they're not obsessing. They're just going out there like, fuck it, I got something to offer. So let me go offer it. I'm sitting over here like, you know, hoarding all of my greatness when, you know, there is, like Dominique said, just like maybe some guilt there, some guilt and like, wow, I'm actually, it's not so much like what happens if I do this, but what happens if I don't? Like what happens? All these people who don't get to benefit from like whatever divine messaging that is channeling through this vessel. So yeah, fear is kind of where I'm at with it. What about y'all? Are there any, do you feel like there's fear or control in like any of the examples that you shared or any other examples that's having you act or not act in particular ways?
I would say yes. The fear of being judged is one. That's like probably my main one. I have many gifts and many talents and many things that I like to share, but I have a fear of just being vulnerable and either taking advantage of me or judging me or gossiping about me behind my back, which they probably already do, but I'm glad I don't know, you know? So yeah, the fear of being judged, which is probably rooted in some type of harm, you know, some type of lack of security. And I'm sure that that's from childhood. Kids can be mean. They can be so mean and ruthless. Like, and I dealt with bullying growing up. So I'm sure that that is probably showing up in this way as an adult. Like, oh, okay, like, let me conform or let me appear to be a certain kind of way because I don't want to stand out too much. You stand out too much, you draw too much attention to you. And I already don't like a lot of like spotlight attention. I like attention, but not in the way of everybody looking at me and everybody examining me. I don't like that. So yeah, I would think what, I don't know, what would be the word? Like what disables me from actually moving forward or doing whatever it is that I want to do or have the desire to do is just my fear of being judged and controlled. Like I like to have things a certain kind of way. I probably got a little bit of OCD or something, whatever. Like I like things to be particular, and too many extra variables will hinder me from allowing, that to be, from allowing the outcome to be what I expected it to be. So I feel you on like the process, like the devotion, the process, the being, the just being present. Like that's what I'm trying to work on, and not really care too much about like the outcome, because you'll never move forward. You'll never move forward like that. Denzel did an interview and he talked about that. I'm gonna try to see if I can pull it up or whatever, but he definitely talked about like if you don't start, you'll never get to the goal. And then if you're not consistent, you'll never get to the goal either. So I think I'm always just looking at the goal, and fear is like a very big component of why I'm a procrastinator.
I put in the chat too that fear of failure is a big part of it. But aside from that, like when I'm thinking about the times where I felt paralyzed because of fear, I'm also thinking about I needed a mindset shift. I was concerned about security and providing for my family. And I was used to being a 9-to-5, kind of person who could look forward to a check every 2 weeks, right? So what does that mean now if I'm going to go out on my own and have faith in myself? What if it doesn't work out? Like, what are we going to do? So that was that other part of, and I think, is it Nakia? Nakaya. She talked about, the judgment too. Hearing people say, "Oh, you quit your job? You thought you better than us?" Right? Like, what do you think you're doing? Essentially, and those things definitely, those thoughts it played out in my head a lot. But I knew better. But it really took a mindset shift of, abundance versus lack. Like we won't lack. As long as I have two feet and 2 hands, we won't lack. But it took a lot of shifting for me and not being afraid of failing to actually get out and do it. So
I wanted to say, like, I think a lot of it is ancestral too. Like, aiming for perfection is like a form of survival for many of our people. Like when I look at like pictures of Black folks in like the 40s and 50s, I mean, they look perfect. Can't imagine how much money a lot of folks had, but they always look like they had a lot, even if they didn't. And I think about like the consequences that our children can experience if their parents aren't aiming for a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalistic idea or value of perfection. You know what I'm saying? What types of experiences or betrayal that society will have for them if we don't. So I feel like we're in like the middle of like this really interesting period, this colonized period of trying to imagine a new world, but also prepare our children to survive in the world that exists. And that's very complicated. Just what comes to mind for me, this is, funny, but when I started going to barbershops at like 14, before I was 14, my mom would take me to like Great Clips and Supercuts to get a haircut. And I hated that. But I started going to Black barbershops around 14. And one of my barbers told me like, yeah, man, like you're supposed to get your haircut every 2 weeks. Like, and if you don't, you're not like, you out of pocket. Like, and I was like, man, like before this, I was getting my hair cut like every 3 months by my mom. You know what I'm saying? And like right now, I don't get a haircut every 2 weeks or whatever, but I think about that. Like, how many parents socialize their kids like, yo, you got to look your best all the time. Not because, you're any less amazing if you don't, but because of where you live and how people will respond to you. So I think that added pressure puts a really, just complicated spin on like us, socializing our kids, to live in the world that we imagine for them, but also to exist in the world that wants to see them fail.
That part about, I'll call it grooming for lack of better words, like it's so big, I feel, especially in like melanated communities, like whether it's about like the aesthetic, especially for women, but also like habits and practices and like smells. like it's just like this obsession with like cleanliness and like being so groomed and like being very neat and tidy. And I think that just fits really well with what you said, Rainbow, and what you put in the chat about like, this theme of perfection being rooted in colonialism, because there's a standard there, right? And like they making sure like your survival is basically dependent on you meeting the standard. But how, the vestiges of that show up today and just some of these ways where even amongst the most radical, freedom fighting, liberating, people, like we are still very much like compressed by these ideas when it comes to like hygiene and aesthetic and like what that really means, and sometimes we feel like it's our own. And what comes to mind for me is like, I have probably like, maybe it's a sensory thing, but like, I don't like stuff on me, like I don't like the feeling of it. So it's not even about the look. So because of that, I then put my standard upon my children. And my oldest is very like, I don't think that he feels anything, because at any given moment, he has so much stuff all over his face. His arm, where he used his arm as his napkin, all down his shirt, like before we start the day, like it's 8 a.m. Like breakfast is done for. And I'm always like, we starting the day. You want to go change? He like, no. And I'm not like that into looks personally. And especially my children, like they could do whatever, like hair done or not, whatever you want to wear, it could fit or not, it could be clean or dirty. However, there's something about like food mess. That's really what it is. Food mess that like really gets to me. And so I'm always trying to invite them into my standard. And they are very, very good at keeping the boundary of like, I do not care about this. Or I'm like, oh, okay, you ate some cherries. It looked like you just bit into a deer. Like you look like a primal something because you're bloody looking. And I'm like, do you want to look in the mirror? They're like, no, like this means nothing. And so I'm constantly like being reflected to myself, like through them, just being able to see how clearly, because of my own experience, which is a very valid one for me, I don't like the feeling of the food, dripping all down my arms and my fingers, on my face. But now, because I care for these people, I'm trying to look out for them by saying, look, don't you want to like feel better by doing this thing? And what they are communicating without, articulating it is that like, this actually doesn't matter to me. And so I can see that colonial process within myself, because it's very like, we can simplify like colonizers if we want to, and just be like, oh, they're devils and blah, blah, blah. Right. But I think really like, whether it was like conquest for religion or, land or what have you, like these people really thought that they were doing something good. Like I'm laughing because I'm like, how could you? But no, they really did. Like they thought like I'm saving these souls, or I'm branching out because like what works for me or what I think is working for me, like y'all all need this. And this like patriarchal and like very like parental energy of like power, the way that we experience like parenthood is like very power dynamic in this society. So like this very like parental energy around like, I know better. And so what works for me, y'all all got to do. And then I get to see that, and I get to see myself like not seeing the separation completely, because I would like to say like, I'm nothing like those colonizers. But the reality is like that seed of perfectionism, like it's insidious and it's there because I'm constantly trying to invite my children into some standard of cleanliness that really suits me because of how it feels. And so I can explain it away by saying like, no, this isn't about aesthetics. Be as dirty as you want. Do whatever you want. But when it comes to food, when you got that honey on your cheek, you know, that syrup dripping down your neck, like, no, we have to get it. But they don't mind. And I'm like, okay, I have to really decolonize my own relationship to guiding them because they're making it very clear, you know, this doesn't matter to me. And I think that for me helps me then do the same thing when there are these like, you know, ambiguous standards that I'm prescribing to. And I'm just like, wow, like you said in the beginning, Nakaya, like what even is mine? I don't know, because for so long, I've let somebody else's sense of value that maybe they had good intentions, truly. I'm letting that determine how I'm moving to the point that I haven't even checked in or even maybe authentically felt like what I want. Like, do I actually want to have my hair done? Do I want to use conditioner? Like, why do I need to have like smooth hair? Like, who is that for? You know, but you know, you're told your hair natural, shit's all over the place. Get some conditioner. It's going to help it. Like, but do I need to do that? You know, so just like asking some of these questions of things that we just do, I think is definitely a part of like decolonizing like our parenting practices for sure, but just the ways in which we even relate to like our own body and our own desire, like our own authentic sense of desire. Like, do you want this? Or somebody told you that this is worthy of wanting. So now you want what everybody got or what have you.
A few things that came up when you said that were, how do we help our children navigate perfectionism, right? Because it's happening to them already. Like, my daughter is wild and free too, and I know I'm putting a lot of standards on her, and I always try to justify it by saying like, it's gonna make my life easier if you do it this way. And it probably will. It probably will conform to what I need you to conform to, because if I let you be wild and free, now you are encroaching on my boundaries. So I'm thinking about like the honey and the syrup. I'm already getting anxious thinking about something like that. Like, no, you cannot walk around with that on your mouth because you're going to flip flop on the couch. Now the couch going to be dirty. Now I'm not going to be able to sit on it because my dress going to get dirty, or I'm going to have to clean it. That's an extra step for me. And I'm like, and I'm already overwhelmed with everything I have to do. That's almost part of the reason why I'm decluttering my house and like significantly simplifying, because I'm like, okay, I can't get any more help to clean. Like, children take from you. They can help you a little bit, but they can't really deep clean like you really need them to or whatever. And I'm like, so how am I going to get the help? If I can't get the help, then I need to reduce the amount of things that I have to actually clean. And in addition to that, I need you to understand that, little 5-year-old brain, right? I need you to understand that so that you don't create more messes for me to clean up because mommy's getting overwhelmed. And if I do just let it go and just let her be wild and free and just do whatever, I kind of know what that's like. I did it when I was pregnant with him, and I did it for like 3 or 4 months. My house was destroyed. Destroyed. I've never lived like that ever in my life before. There was things everywhere. There were dishes piled up everywhere. And that was because I'm like, I don't really care anymore about what my husband's gonna think if his house ain't clean. Like that's an intruding thought that I think about too. And I was raised that way as well. I can hear my mom now. No man wants a nasty woman. She taught us that at a very young age. My sister and I, like, no man wants that. So you need to make sure you keep the house clean. And I'm always thinking about that or whatever. And I like cleanliness too, but I seen what it felt like to just say, my hands is off of it. Whatever happens. Let this girl be wild and free and let her have fun or whatever. She didn't really backslide in her education as much as I thought that she would. She actually gained some skills, but her attention did kind of, it wasn't as great as I needed it to be or whatever. Like it did recede a little bit. And then there were other things like I needed to, when I did decide to actually clean, it was a really, really, really big job. So I think about that and that was like one way to justify like, no, I got to stay on top of it. And I got to make sure my kids stay on top of it too, because if not, they're going to create a bigger mess for me because I'm the only one that's going to clean it up, as we could see from previous historical accounts. And that was one thing I thought of. And then the second thing I thought of was helping her navigate perfectionism. I'm grateful that her processes are a lot different because that stuff goes right over her head. She don't be giving a damn about none of that. But recently, and probably ever since she was born, before she was born, let me take it back. When my family found out that I was pregnant with a girl, a couple of them gave me like this type of reaction. Ooh, you need a boy. And I didn't understand why. And like my sister and I was pregnant around the same time and they're like, oh, she having a boy. She need a girl and you need a boy. And I was just thinking like, and I asked, I was like, is it really going to be that much of a difference? Like, I mean, I don't understand. They're like, oh, well, you don't like to, you don't do your hair all the time. So I know you're not going to do her hair. I'm like, wow. Okay. Some truth is coming out. Okay. So I'm just accepting it. And then here we are again with, maybe a year into her life. I had a close, her father was like, y'all should lock y'all hair. Well, I'm like, I don't want to lock my hair. I like to change my hair up too much. I just don't want to do it. I want to flat iron it. I want to braid it up. If I want to wear some faux locks, I'm just too diverse when it comes down to my hairstyles, whatever. I don't want to do that. And then another thing is, I didn't want her to have her hair locked. So I'm like, what if she don't want it? Consent was a thing for me. Sorry, guys. Consent was a thing for me at the time or whatever. So I didn't do it. And then just recently went to go visit family this weekend. And I had some people say, you should really think about locking her hair. And my husband brought it up again. And then it started dawning on me. I'm like, oh, because her hair is wild and free right now, whatever, it is unacceptable in your eyes. And they're like, oh, no, it's not that. It's just, I know she doesn't like getting it done. She doesn't like getting it washed. I'm like, well, when you have locks, you still have to wash your hair. So it's going to be the same thing. I'm like, and if she's sensitive to, touch, or if she has extra sensitivities when it comes to her hair, you have to get your hair retwisted, relocked. You don't have to. You could just have freeform locks, but I feel like I kind of know my daughter a little bit, and I know that when she sees something, she might want a bow in her hair. She might ask me for braids or beads sometimes. What am I going to tell her? Your hair is too unmanageable, so I had to lock it up. That I'm not going to do that. Not for nobody else's standards. Like, and it kind of makes me think back to my own childhood. I had very thick hair, still do, but I have very, very thick hair, just like hers. And I can hear the demeaning comments that my own mother would make about my hair. And it's just, oh, your hair just so nappy. It's just like your father's or whatever. And I got a perm at 5 years old. And I had a perm from 5 until 19. And that was just a part of my life. I didn't know anything outside of that until I decided, I'm like, I don't want a perm no more. I don't want this. It's too much maintenance. My hair don't grow past my chin. I don't want it. And I can hear a couple of family members saying like, oh, well, What you gonna do? Walk around with a little afro looking like Angela Davis? I'm like, if that's what it takes, if that's what my natural hair look like, I'm like, because if God put this in my head and this is what it naturally is like when I was born, then God must be wrong, right? That's what you're implying. God must have been wrong when he created my hair to be the way that it is. So I'm just thinking about all of those things and how to teach her how to just, man, you could be yourself. If you want your hair to be like that, let it be like that or whatever, rock it. And teaching myself to not personalize or internalize what other people got to say about how she's looking, because she's comfortable with it. And I need to just be comfortable that she's comfortable. Even if I did try to control it and make sure that it was always pristine and neat, I'm not going to be able to do that forever. That's just not, it's not sustainable. She's going to become more autonomous and she's going to decide eventually. She might shave her hair. She actually asked me to cut her hair off one time. I don't want to get it washed. Let's just go to the barbershop. And I was at that point, I'm like, let's go to the barbershop. And her dad was like, man, hell no, she ain't finna go get her hair cut. We're not doing that. We're finna have to just do her hair. So it's so many. Yes. Glass. It's so many dynamics to think about when it comes to our own Black cultural rituals, I would say, and traditions. So I'm gonna leave it at that because he's gonna start crying.
Nakia, you said something that made me think about what Shanika said earlier about like people giving us standards of perfection and then like growing from their own metric and not even grieving about what they once believed. Like them same people telling daughters to wear their hair a certain way, they gonna have kids one day and let their hair do, let them do whatever they want and not even think twice about it. And then not even apologize for saying like, yo, I should have, been a little bit more mindful. Y'all, so I used to work, I still work at Chicago State, but I used to go to this conference called the Thurgood Marshall Leadership Institute. And in 2017, they lifted this ban that allowed men to wear locks. Prior to 2000, it's the Thurgood Marshall, Thurgood Marshall, right? This conference did not let Black men wear locks prior to 2017. Like they would deny folks to go to this leadership conference. And then now, you go on the Leadership Institute website and they got a whole bunch of folks with like all types of hairstyles. And it's like, y'all got some audacity, I bet y'all ain't, do nothing for the folks that y'all denied. And there's a whole bunch of, articles and, postings about it. But I think that just gives us space to grow ourselves, and to not feel like we have to owe anybody for past decisions that we held, even if they contradict with what we have now. Like we have so many examples on this end. But yeah, we don't owe nobody, even ourselves. So thank you for sharing that, because it made me think about a lot of things.
For sure.
It was something that you said too, Kaya, that made me think about. I wrote down, because I thought about it before when somebody else was talking, but I forgot because I got to talking. But like when we talk about this conversation around navigating perfectionism, like basically how are we moving through this? This thought of like the adult gaze as it relates to parenthood, like came strong, like to me, just like so much of what we shared. And I posted some things to my stories and like asked a few questions and people responded. And the majority of the responses that I received were people feeling self-conscious about other people's judgments of or like family members, namely, but just people in the public, like other adults, how they felt about the decisions they were making. And so often I see like my peers, like they have to have this whole set of armor to like bring their children around their family because or like maybe their partner or co-parent's family or something, because people are looking for opportunity really to criticize the choices that you're making and how you're actualizing those choices in your parenting. And what that really feels like to me, because I'm thinking about like when I'm doing that to my own children, even though it's like not intentional, like I love them. I don't want them to feel, any ill feelings, especially coming from me. But like I said, like we're not really separate of this, the more aware that we are, like we're not separate from this. And I know that when I'm doing that to them, trying to, bring them into some standard through like maybe a more critical sounding type of a feedback, it's really because there is some like unmet need of my own. And so I'm looking at the way that I'm guiding them or facilitating them in their growth and development as like an opportunity to meet the need. And so when I experience other people doing that, like to other adults, like adults to other adults, it's like really you're utilizing this opportunity. Like you got activated by something you saw in this parenting dynamic or in the child in and of itself, because people, like, of course, your child reflects you, right? So this is like half the reason why people are trying to control so much about their children, because they see it as them. They see the child as them. So if people notice something about your child, how they're looking, sounding, acting, dressing, whatever, if they go to school, if they don't, whatever the case, they never go to the doctor or whatever, they are looking and feeling some sense of activation. And underneath that, to me, there's an unmet need that they were never taught to articulate, because it's always about what the child needs to do or not do, or what the parents need to do or not do. How many times have we heard people say, oh, her parents should be ashamed of themselves or whatever? It's like, jump into these conclusions. I feel like that only can come from a place of like your own internalized inadequacy, because why else would it feel necessary to like have that type of like critique of someone? Like, because if you cared, like if you truly cared and you thought that how you thought was right, then you could support, you know what I mean? But that's not what happens. There's the criticism. And so for me, I really do have this sense and this feeling that that is coming from people's own unmet need. And they're using this opportunity or they're using like this situation, this dynamic between another adult and the child that they're parenting as an opportunity to get that need met. Granted, it usually never is. But again, it's that control thing. Like, some of the roots of the perfectionism, like you're fearing something, you done got activated and you want to control something. So because you feel so out of control with what's going on here, you're going to look outside of you and critique what this parent and this child is doing or not doing. And that sounds very much like the white gaze and how melanated folks are navigating that. And it actually doesn't feel very different. Like obviously there are some nuances, but like all of this, I feel has roots in something common. So it's like when we think about the power dynamics that exist between adult and child, like, is that, some people will say that's natural. I don't know that that's natural. I think that that's something that we've learned. Like, yes, there are differences between, these life stages, but is it inherently so that if you're older, that you should have more power? That doesn't quite seem like it makes sense. The same way of like, oh, because you are richer, smarter, or because you white, like you should have the power and control. It's really just your knowledge and experience is favored. And I think that that's the society we live in. As adults, our knowledge and experience is favored over those of children. Which, I mean, ancestrally speaking, I feel like we were looking to children for like the gifts that they offer, like just being closer to to those veils, where like the sensitivities, like that we can notice children tapping into so much more with ease, like energetically and emotionally. Like, I feel like ancestrally we were paying attention to that, but now we've been taught somebody else's way that says like, oh, they come blank and they don't know. And you have to pour something into them and you have to mold them and shape them to get ready for this world that you live in, when really they're coming through already with some value. So I think that these things are really comparable. And I just wrote that down, and I felt like I just want to put that onto the space. Like, so much of what we're doing or not doing is like under this adult gaze, which sounds very much like this white gaze. In the spirit of kind of coming back to the question, yes, it's a question. At this time, if anybody has any ideas or breakthroughs or downloads around personally or something that you think could extend out to others, how to navigate this thing that we seem to all kind of have some rub with, but it's not quite ours, like it's really coming from outside of us. It's somebody else's or something else's. And we're moving through. If you have any ideas or practices in your own life, or maybe things that you want to try that you think will be helpful, if you want to share, or maybe just stream of consciousness kind of process.
I think going into anything with gratitude and reflection on like the things that you have accomplished can kind of give you like a lifeline. So when you're going down that dark hole of, those negative thoughts about how you're not good enough, or how you should, right? That word should have done, or should have been, or should have learned something. I think having a lifeline of gratitude kind of keeps you a little bit grounded into the now. And if that takes you like writing it down and like reflecting on it, like I love to use this as an example, like my whiteboard. I just keep a whiteboard and I write down things that I'm grateful for. If it pop up in my head, I walk up to my whiteboard and just write it down, because those doubts can definitely creep into your mind. And I think we think about the negatives a lot more than we think about the positives. So just kind of staying thankful. And maybe even limiting. And this is something that I'm not even for sure, but I'm just throwing it out there for feedback. Maybe even limiting yourself, limiting access to yourself from those people that may like put their standards on you. We don't want to live in a fishbowl, obviously, and we need diverse opinions and reflections because we're interdependent creatures. But if it's starting to feel overwhelming and you're starting to feel lost, or you're feeling a lot more disappointment and guilt and shame around what you should have done, asking yourself the question, why? And trying to reflect on who told you that. Where'd you get that from? That can kind of like maybe bring you back in and let you know like, oh, okay, well, maybe my boundary needs to be a little bit more fortified so that those types of people can't intrude, into my thought process anymore. Especially if you don't have the courage at the time to really like stand up and just say, hey, that's good. That works for you. It don't work for me. And I think as a parent, we all want to say that we're courageous and we advocate for our children and, we will protect them from any and all types of harm. But honestly, that's not always the case, because we are healing. We are little big children that are still healing from our own wounds. And a lot of the times the perfectionism that we place or internalize and put on our children are defense mechanisms for our own security and harm. So we're trying to protect ourselves from harm or hurt feelings and judgment and fear of failure and all these other things or whatever. So we put it on our children so that they don't reflect poorly on us or whatever. But if you're not at that stage yet, where you can feel comfortable with, like defending, and maybe not even just defending, but just standing there, just standing still. You don't have to be going on the defense, but just standing still as a barrier. Like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate your intent, but we all good over here. If you're not there yet, then it might be good to kind of remove yourself from those folks, at least for a little while, until you can get strong enough, right? So that's my stream of consciousness on that.
Well, give thanks. This whole conversation was super rich, y'all. I'm thinking about, this book, Teaching to Transgress by Bell Hooks. It's like a teaching book, but it's a parenting book too. It could be, at least. And I'm paraphrasing something that she said, but it really reminded me of this conversation. It was like, the goal of abolitionist classrooms ain't to, create stellar students, but to support human beings. And I'm thinking about how perfectionism could be antithetical to the process of reaching humanity. So like I'm like a metrics dude. I'm always like, trying to like check stuff off the list, which, is an issue in itself. But I'm like, okay, if I could change that for perfectionism to like qualities of humanity, like laughing, lessons learned, intimate moments, whatever, right? Me trying to identify ways that we're creating better human beings, not even better human beings, but just, human beings, and or just supporting the human process with our kids. So this whole conversation made me think of that, that book, but also the meaning behind, supporting our children in their human journey.
I'm glad you said that. Like supporting our children in their human journey. I like metrics too, but I'm slowly coming around to just the flow of life and kind of giving up some of that control of like needing to know where we started, where we're going, how far we've gotten there, and and why do I need to know all of that, or who do I need to report that to? Like, yeah, that's a whole conversation in itself, especially when it comes down to like educating your child or just creating an environment for your child to be educated in. Like that's a whole topic right there or whatever. But like, I like that you gave those examples of like more laughter, right? More opportunities for intimacy. And because those are like real life things, real life aspects, real life activities that human beings need to experience in order to be human, in order to be humane. And that's not always measurable, right? It's not always measurable, but we know what it feels like when you don't have it. And it's nothing that you can like write down or prescribe to like help you like get there. It's a state of being. It's like, it's an experience. But if we're so focused on the metrics of life or standards or perfectionism or whatever else a person has put on us for us to put on our children, then we're just raising little human beings that won't experience that because they are living up to somebody else's standards. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. That really confirmed a lot for me.
Yes, Kaya, comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that comparison piece like fits very much into like the critical nature of like being perfectionist. And something that I want to share just personally, I want to say really probably the start of my parenting journey was when I started existing more like in a self-directed way. Before that, I was like, you know, your token, super excellent, accomplished type of a person that was like hitting all the bars, you know, and I really let that go when I became pregnant. And what I realized is different or was different from before and when I became pregnant is that when I was pregnant, that was the most in touch with my body that I had ever been. And not just like, oh, because I have this life growing inside. So like I'm in touch with that part, but really feeling sensations and allowing the feeling to determine a course of action. Like for my decision to not be about what I think, but to be truly rooted in like what I feel. Because before it was all about what I thought. You know, I could think my way into or out of anything. And that was something that I prided myself on because it was a survival skill. And it was the way that I achieved excellence in so many areas. So it was something that I was like, yeah, this is like worthy. But being pregnant, it took me out of like my thinking self, brain thinking. And I was more so thinking with other parts of my body. And maybe it's not thinking at all. Maybe it was listening. It was like, you know, maybe the answer or the direction was being communicated and I just needed to listen. So whether that be like something in my body or my baby or some energy outside of me, trying to communicate, just like having that connection with my body, I would say was like key for me. And so I noticed that even now, so that was like the shift. And even now, I would say that still rings very true, that not just like being connected to my body and listening, but even more so now that I have 2 children and I am a birth worker. It's a fruit fly up in here. And I'm a birth worker and I'm like constantly providing like care and just, you know, in the thick of care work, I find that I have to be very intentional about caring for my body so that it can be a clear channel to even receive and so I can hear, you know. And so that I think is something that could benefit people, whether you're a parent or not, in just being able to discern and create healthy boundaries around like what's yours and what's not. So like whatever standard that you're trying to uphold or meet, like really understanding like where it's coming from. Like, is this something that is authentic to you, or is this something that you consumed and you don't even know the difference because, you know, maybe you haven't had the opportunities to even know what it feels like to feel your own feelings and listen as opposed to thinking so much. So I took some notes on these things. Just have a little list of things that, you know, practices that we can be with. Raymond, if you don't mind putting the title of that book in the chat, that's the only thing that I didn't write down. But yeah, if there's like anything else that's like coming through that needs to be said, we can say those things and listen to those things. And then we can close and we can move into the rest of our nights.
I just want to say, I think from what you just said, one key takeaway is when you're not sure of like what thoughts belong to you or what philosophies belong to like you that you created, it'll be great to kind of get in tune with your intuition, because I think intuition is just like a really good compass. It shows you the direction that you need to go. You personally need to go in, because feelings don't lie, right? What you feel is it comes from something, and it could come from thoughts, but from my experience, your feelings and being in tune with self, like bodily feelings or emotional feelings or spiritual downloads, they tend to be a little bit more accurate than thoughts. Thoughts kind of remind me of the movie Inception. Like somebody in another dimension is putting some thoughts into your head and you don't even know it. You don't know it. But feelings, you can really pinpoint a feeling. Like, hold on. I'm feeling this because of what? And you can really kind of like just kind of scroll back a couple of pages and figure out like where it came from, versus a thought that it could have been implanted through TV programming,
Yeah.
or something. So,
and oftentimes like the thought follows the feeling, because it's like the thought is like the part of us that like has language and has past experiences that we try to incorporate into, making the feeling make sense. Because I guess we feel we need that. We think we need that. We think our feelings need to make sense. But yeah, I really like that one. Got that one down too. Intuition. Well, I thank y'all for being here, for having this conversation, for sharing so openly and vulnerably about how imperfect you are and how we're navigating like what that actually means. I wanted to just invite everybody to, like, once we leave this call and for every day after, to find some practice, whatever resonates with you. Find some practice that allows you to get to know yourself in a way that you haven't, in like the most honest way. And this invitation is like coming on the heels of something that I said earlier to Kit when he asked me, like, do you want me to come to this birthday party that we were at? Was for a child. And I was just like, I mean, if you desire to be at the birthday party. And he was like, yeah, I'll come. And I was like, no. I'm really asking, like, not what you think I want you to do, or not what you think like other people will think if you are not there, or what you think the manly, fatherly thing for you to do. But like, truly, like, check in with your desire and your capacity, and wherever that intersects, you make your decision. And I'm like, and suspend, like, I'm gonna feel how I'm gonna feel regardless. I might be excited that you're not going to come. I might feel let down because I needed some support. But that's really my journey. And I really just wanted to invite him into being in that practice of just what do you have capacity for, and what do you actually deeply desire that's independent of anything or anyone else. And I felt like I said that to him really because I needed that invitation as well. It was like me giving myself the permission to be doing that as well. And so I really just kind of walked away from that feeling like I wanted to extend that invitation to you all. And I think that that is like a really good portal into understanding and recognizing what our own unique standards are and accepting that they will be different. You know, like my standard for how I eat or sleep or parents or whatever is going to be different from the next person. And that is like totally okay. And there is no need to be critical about it. And there's no need to judge anybody else about it because we're figuring out and we're doing the best that we can do at every point. But I do think like that level of honesty is what will allow for us to like really navigate some of this perfectionism, because there are a lot of scripts, I'll say, you know, that we're trying to act out the parts, a lot of masks that we wear just to like be in this life. And it doesn't give us a lot of space to be in connection with like the true authentic desire that we have. Like we get to see our kids, you know, exercise and operate from like their authentic desire. So I wanted to leave y'all with that invitation to find whatever that practice is for you, of that radical honesty and being in connection with their desire. And before we leave, to whatever capacity that you can right now, with what you got going on, your baby's driving, etc., I just invite you to, again, just take some deep breaths, bring your shoulders down away from your ears and back, and breathe in anything that felt resonant for you, anything that activated you, and to breathe out anything that's not yours, that you don't want to hold anymore, any shame, guilt, or grief for not meeting some standard. Just take another deep breath in, fill up your belly, and then your chest. Really expand and just feel yourself taking up space in whatever kind of body you got right now. It's worthy. You are the standard. May you remember that. May you be that.